Welcome back to another episode of Teaching Me Outbound. This week we're with Troy Munson. Troy, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Troy Munson. I'm a senior enterprise account executive at Proofpoint. Been in sales for closing role for about 6 years now, and just have always found it fascinating to see what kind of ways I can break into accounts and things like that. But really excited to be here, Joe. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And like I said to you before the call, it was Will Falkenberg who actually got me into you. I saw his comment on your LinkedIn profile, and you've got a lot of knowledge on there. So people definitely check that out. Really just going to break through your entire flow with your prospecting session in this one and see what tips we can give out to people. Wanted to really
Yeah.
start with the fact that recently you said you haven't used any email automation software for at least the last couple of years, and you've seen some great results from that. Was there a point in
Yeah.
time when you really decided you needed to do this? What made you actually make that switch?
Yeah, so I guess we can kind of go all the way back to when I first started using automation software, and that was at my very first gig. My camera's blurry here. That was at my very first gig, and it was Sales Loft. And at the time, it was amazing, right? Nobody was able to send out thousands of emails at once and get responses back, and nobody's inbox was just getting blown up by all these stupid emails. So I used it a lot, and I kept on using it for 3 or 4 years. And then COVID hit, and I immediately saw like, hey, this isn't really working as well as it used to. And I still used it here and there for some accounts that I didn't really care too much to spend a lot of time on. However, when I stopped, I realized a couple of things. One, I was relying on, when you're in sales, you hear that, hey, it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. Get your volume up, all that good stuff. And so I did it really for the volume. We were measured, one of our KPIs is how many times we're emailing people. And so I used it for that. But when I stopped, I actually started realizing, like, one, I know my territory. When I was using it, I had no idea like about my territory. Of course, I knew some good accounts that I wanted to get into and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, like, I didn't know the people at the good accounts very well. I didn't know more than like the top 10 accounts, nothing like that. Because I was relying on, hey, my email tool will just send out hundreds, thousands of emails, and I'll know who's interested. So one, it made me learn about my territory when I dropped it. And two, I actually cared about my prospects. So when I was using the tool, I just didn't really care about who it was. Just go and book me a meeting. But now it's completely different. And I stopped using it, like you mentioned, I don't know, 2 years or so ago. But now I'm doing in-depth research on the typically C level, VP level, director level. I'll do some pretty in-depth research on. Outside of that, I'll kind of do more generic stuff, but it's never automated. It's just short little generic messages. But now I know a really good amount about director level and above, and a really good amount about all of my top accounts, because I'm sitting there, I'm doing the research day in, day out. And when I started doing that, my messaging went from, hey, here's my product. Are you interested? To, hey, here's the challenges I think you're having based on my research. Here's how we could possibly help. And that just, I realized I was booking 2, 3 times the meetings doing that than I was just sitting there and relying on my sales automation tool to do everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the amount of emails people are getting every day is just crazy, right? So the fact you're actually sending ones that are
Yeah.
going to send out, you're doing the research. It seems like common sense, but not enough people are doing it at the moment. Before
No.
going into the research piece, so now that obviously you have less time because you're not emailing 1,000 people, so you're doing the research. I guess you have to
Yep.
be a lot more selective on who you're speaking to. And you sort of mentioned on LinkedIn
Yeah.
before, like sort of some tips on how to start your day on Sales Navigator. But what are the key triggers that you're really looking at that you've seen a lot of success at now that you don't speak to as many people? What are you really trying to target that people could copy if they were switching to this more manual approach?
So I actually start every single thing from LinkedIn. It helps to give a background. Right now, I target cybersecurity professionals, but before this, I targeted marketing professionals. Cybersecurity people are not as active on LinkedIn, and I've noticed that. However, most of my net new logo meetings have come from LinkedIn, so it's pretty. I guess that's kind of like contradicting there, but um, The first thing that I do is literally, if you, I recently made a post of how I booked my last 4 meetings at large enterprise accounts. And if you look at it, most of it is sourced from LinkedIn. So I'm always looking at like what kind of comments they're making or what sort of posts they're making. And if you have Sales Navigator and you save them all into a list, all of your ICP, then you can literally just go to the dashboard and see every single person in that saved list that has made a post. You can hit the button that says view, and now you're allowed to make a comment on that post without being redirected from the page.
Hmm.
But the reason why I do this, and I do this every single day, the reason why I do this is because one, they're going to see that Troy Munson commented and they're going to see my face. So when I do go and try to warm them up to start reaching out to them, they already kind of know who I am. That's another reason why I post a lot on LinkedIn. So when I'm commenting, I'm liking their stuff, and they see posts from me all throughout the day, it's like, oh, Troy Munson. Like I've heard that name. So that's one thing is like I always start from LinkedIn. How much information can I get on LinkedIn? Typically, people share one of three things, and it's company updates that are pretty important, like funding announcements, acquisitions. One personal, like awards or certifications that they're sharing with their network. That's a great way to reach out. And then the third thing that they typically share is something that they have done or have been a part of. So, like a blog or an article or podcast. That's the main three things people share on LinkedIn. All three of those are gold for your prospecting. So I always start from LinkedIn. From there, I typically go into job descriptions, job careers, as well as right now with cybersecurity, I try to see if there's any sort of trigger of breaches, and I'll look through like their actual 10K reports and investor day reports and things like that. But if you're targeting startups, I usually start at LinkedIn and then I start at their company page, and then I go to jobs or I go to news and resources at the bottom of their website, and then it'll actually give you all the company updates that's been going on at that company. So that's typically where I kind of spend my time to break into accounts.
Nice. Just get into the research piece a bit more. Going back to that post that you said, and is quite what was interesting is each of them were really different, right? Like there wasn't a silver
Yeah.
bullet for getting into the account, but for again, I guess you made the point that you've got a select list of accounts. You have time to be doing a lot of research, right? And you
Hmm.
also acknowledge that there are some
Yeah.
people who don't have that time. Um, but
Yeah.
what, in terms of
Of
actually just
course.
getting better at research, where again, going, you said, look at the reports, looking at these sort of specific ones, is there any sort of
Yep.
like cross industry tips you can give people for that research stage, especially for people who still need to do quite quick research and hit X amount of accounts every day?
Yeah. So, yes, and this is going to sound dumb, but ChatGPT 4 specifically, not 3.5, but 4, you can literally say, hey, I work at this company and I'm targeting this company or this person at this company. Give me 5 reasons why they'd be a good fit based on any articles, podcasts, videos that they've been in or whatever. And then it'll feed you everything plus the links to all the articles that they've been mentioned in. So that's a really quick way to get information on specific people. Now, at my last company, I had 300 plus accounts. This is kind of that scenario that you're talking about where I don't have time to research everybody in 300 plus accounts. And I completely understand that. If you've ever been in a closing role, then there's one thing that you know, and it's that most of your accounts are crap and that they're not going to ever buy from you. And so, in my opinion, I think that every single person that is in a closing role needs to have their territory tiered out between like tier A, B, C, D, whatever they want to do. And when you do that, like you, as a sales rep, you kind of know what's a good customer and what's not. And so when you do that, for example, in my last company, I had 80 accounts that would purchase my solution probably. 40 of those were tier one because I knew that these 40 accounts, they're B2B SaaS, they're this size, they do this much revenue, they're active on LinkedIn, etc. I had all this stuff broken down. The other 40 were like, yeah, they're okay fits. And then like the next 200, they were like manufacturing shops and stuff that we would never be able to sell to. They don't use the right technology. And so I would never focus my time on those other 200 plus accounts. I would just focus on those 80 accounts. So that's kind of what I would recommend. Everyone knows that if you have a list of 800 plus accounts, maybe 80% of them will not be a good fit to be a customer. That's just the way it goes. And there's no way around it.
Awesome. I love the ChatGPT
Yeah.
tip as well. I like tips for ChatGPT that are actually useful and not saying just write your cold
Yeah.
emails in it. And going
Yeah,
on
dude,
to
I cold emails from ChatGPT are brutal. Please, no one use
yeah,
those. Yeah.
going into the cold email a bit, and again, I saw recently you wanted to help the community out, and you said send me your cold emails. I'll let you know what I think of them.
Mm,
And I saw the one that is the best one. It was the review website, which is awesome. From doing that
yeah.
activity, what do you think of the state of cold email at the moment? Was it a generally good level you're receiving? Were some bad? What was the general vibe with them?
So for starters, I thought maybe 5 to 10 people would reach out on that day, and 34 did, and like 10 more did the day after.
Yeah,
Um, You know, there were actually more well written emails than I thought, but there were also, I'd say, the other chunk was really long, really big. Like, here's the 4 things that we do, bullet points. Here's a bold snippet of what a customer has said. Like, it was almost like a landing page, to be honest. And so it was mixed. It was mixed. Some people really, and I think that because I'm posting on LinkedIn, that means I think a fair amount of them have been following, LinkedIn content on how to write better emails. So I think that a lot of them knew, like, okay, I know the basics. But then others, yeah, I was like, we can definitely shorten this and take out a lot of these really big words that you're using. Nonetheless, the number one thing was people just like to fill their emails with like very strange words that they don't need. Like, you don't need to be like significantly boost your ROI. Like, just take out the word significantly. There's no reason to put that in there. There's just a lot of filler words that are being used, which makes it just too long to read.
yeah. I think, like you said, when people are on LinkedIn, you assume the quality of cold email is better than it actually is, but then you look at, well, even my inbox, you look at it and you think, how have you not seen any of the tips? There's some really good advice out there.
Yeah,
People just aren't following it.
and people and typically people won't continue doing the same exact thing that doesn't work. So I always wonder, these really long emails with that looks like a landing page, like, are they working in some industries? Are they working for some people? They don't work really well for me unless, my only caveat to long emails is if it's to like a C-level executive and you've done a ton of research on their business and you kind of tie every single value prop of what you found to your solution. That's worked for me a couple of times, but man, that's a 30 plus minute email that I'm writing and that I'm proofreading and that I'm making sure like the email's right that I'm sending it to. And but those are far few and in between.
Definitely. And just finish up as well, keep this short. Looking as well at the sort of how you book meetings, said some are through email, some are through phone. You start on LinkedIn normally as your first point of contact. Do you have a general flow you're following, like general cadence, or are you actually really mixing up depending on that person?
Oh man, I mix it up. And that's why I wanted to share exactly how I booked my last 4 meetings, is because I wanted to be like, one of them came from me just sharing a marketing message to somebody. Another one came from me inviting somebody to a football game, like giving them tickets to a football game. And most of what I do starts on email, or sorry, starts on LinkedIn. And I don't have like a very specific flow. Like, today I'm going to reach out on email or on LinkedIn, and tomorrow or 2 days I'll do a email. Then after that I'll call them the same day. Like, I don't have any sort of process behind it. I just know, hey, I'm going to get all my information from LinkedIn for the most part, and then I'll translate that information into an email or a cold call, whatever it might be. One thing that I do that's very interesting is to the lower level people that are in my accounts that I want to reach out to. Instead of sharing what I do, like for example, I work at a cybersecurity company. We post a lot of public data based on like the attacks and like the types of cyber attacks that are out there in the world. Um, I literally just message them and I say, hey, like, do you mind if I share with you a few of the attacks that we're catching, that way that you can be aware of it? Like, I'm not even saying anything about my product. I'm literally just giving them value. Hey, do you want to know what kind of attacks are out there? Because their job is to go out and search for attacks so their company doesn't get hacked. So for me, it's just like, hey, let me just make you aware of a few attacks that are out there so you can, be ahead of the game. And that has given me tons and tons of
Yeah,
meetings, because then we start having a conversation and then it comes down to, them opening up about their challenges, and I use that to go up the ladder. So no real flow. I know that was a long-winded answer. No real flow, but there is a little bit of a method to my madness.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that as well with the bottom up example. You hear that a lot in, especially people selling to sales teams, because it's a bit easier. You can speak to another salesperson, and there's always a bit of leeway. But if you're going cybersecurity,
Yeah.
then you don't have that same. So you really
Yeah.
need to be leading with value. Awesome. All right, I appreciate your time today, Troy. I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.